Welcome to Venture Houston 2021 Conference and Pitch Competition. Brought to you by Stephanie Campbell, Managing Director, Houston Angel Network. Brad Burke, Managing Director, Rice Alliance. Harvin Moore, President, Houston Exponential. And Sandy Guitar, Managing Director, HX Venture Fund. Please welcome Managing Director of HX Venture Fund, Sandy Guitar.
Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Venture Houston 2021 Conference and Pitch Competition. Thank you to the over 2,500 people who are participating in this conference, the first of its kind in Houston. Day 1 was exciting, with thoughtful conversations in the morning about ecosystem development and innovation culture, institutional venture capital investing, and how to scale your business. Each conversation combined the expertise of venture capitalists, corporate innovators, and Houston startup founders. Then the afternoon began a series of pitches from our 30 Houston-based semifinalists in the pitch competition. Today, we will continue along this front. We'll start a conversation about one of Houston's core strengths, diversity. Then we will have what promises to be a fascinating discussion of life science investing and the impact of COVID. We'll talk about what's next for Houston and take time to show some really interesting data on Houston-based myths and realities. Then we go to our Game Changer series, with dedicated conversations by technology verticals that matter to Houston. Pick the tech verticals of most interest to you and listen in. This afternoon, of course, is the pitch competition finals, where we'll give away over $1.7 million in investment prizes, not to mention in-kind prizes and cash prizes. You won't want to miss it. And now let me turn the stage over to Michael Leip of Insperity to lead an important discussion about diversity, a force multiplier in venture capital. Michael?
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Venture Houston. We certainly had a fantastic first day, as Sandy just talked about. I know that today's sessions are going to be equally as impactful. And I'm certainly excited for the finals of the pitch competition as well this afternoon. Just some amazing founders and teams that I know that's certain that Houston is going to be hearing a lot about in the future. So yeah, my name is Michael Leip and I work for Insperity as the Managing Director of Brand and Marketing Strategy. And I am so pleased to be your moderator for today's session, Diversity, a Force Multiplier for Venture Capital. Insperity has been proud to call the great city of Houston our home for nearly 35 years. So as a Houston-based startup ourselves, we have benefited from the amazing talent and the infrastructure this amazing city provides as we sought to redefine and reimagine the role of human resources for growth-minded businesses, helping business leaders maximize their talent and minimize the risk associated with being an employer. So at Insperity, our mission is simple: to help businesses succeed so communities prosper. And that begins right here in the place we're so proud to call home. So to that end, we are thrilled and honored to be the anchor investor for the Houston Exponential Venture Fund, joining a who's who of limited partners, each working to take tangible steps to transform Houston into the next great innovation ecosystem. So for those of you who are not aware, the HX Venture Fund is a venture capital fund of funds focused on expanding Houston's tech ecosystem by bringing top-tier venture capital expertise and investment to Houston-based startups. And we celebrate together that here with you at Venture Houston. So I'm pleased to be joined by our panelists today, 2 people many of you know and 2 people I'm proud to call friends. Let me start. Stephanie Campbell. Stephanie, would you please introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background?
Thank you, Michael. Very excited to be here today on day 2 of Venture Houston. I'm Stephanie Campbell. I'm the Managing Director of the Houston Angel Network, and I'm also the co-founder of the Artemis Fund. The Artemis Fund invests in women-led tech startups all across the United States. I'm really excited to talk about this diversity panel today, and I'm really going to bring some of that diverse perspective and open conversation. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you. So Heath, let me turn it over to you as well. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here with both of you. I'm Heath Butler, and Managing Director here at Mercury Fund. We invest in early stage. We invest early stage capital into B2B software companies, and I lead our future of work investment theme. I'm also the founder of Urban Capital Network, which is an angel investment platform providing access to venture-backed opportunities in a affordable, diversified, and de-risked manner. And we created Urban Capital Network to democratize access to venture opportunities for a broader group of investors. And I think some of those experiences will be relevant to today's topic. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Heath. I want to say thanks to each of you for joining us here this morning. We hope to have some time for your questions, so please submit your questions through the Q&A module in our platform, and we'll be sure to get to as many as we can. So let's grab your coffee and let's dig into our topic. So, I want to use our time this morning to have some meaningful discussion on what is clearly an exceedingly relevant topic. The events of the past year, be they on the business front or the public health front or even the political front, are issues that have tapped into the social fabric of our society. They've all come to the fore, and many of them done so in what seemed like a compounding way. And because these events occurred in the context of an election cycle, and because we know that the inertia of elections tend to drive people into places that divide rather than unite, it's important that we acknowledge that when we put the deep and meaningful discussions of this magnitude into that context, it can often create more heat than light. So our passions and our partisanship on issues can burn hot and in some cases boil over in an effort to make voices heard. So today, what I want us to do is have this important discussion in a way that acknowledges this topic is dealing with the deeply personal realities that many people have faced and are facing, and it's touching on the foundational questions of equality and justice within our society, in particular within the business context. But I also hope that we can do it in a way that really does shed light on the things that we have in common, and hopefully gives light to the path ahead where we, as many, those who deeply care for the people, the businesses, the culture, and the future of Houston, can take a confident step forward, seeking to find unity over division. So to start off our discussion today, I would like to consider an illustration, and I'll use the example of a symphony orchestra. I really can't think of a more fitting illustration of the power of diversity in action. The strings, the woodwinds, the brass, the percussion, a radically diverse set of instruments, each being played by a radically diverse set of musicians, each uniquely talented in their own right. But when they begin to play in time and in key and in unison, the power of diversity becomes a force multiplier. So that's our topic, and I want us to dig into it. So in the spirit of that idea, I want us to talk about how diversity can become a force multiplier for you and your business, particularly in the context of Houston's burgeoning venture capital ecosystem. So Heath and Stephanie are our experts here today. So let me turn to you for your perspective as we get started on this. There really is this sense of audaciousness to our title of our panel, because it is stating that a commitment to diversity is about becoming a force multiplier for greater returns. So Stephanie, let me turn to you. How can we frame this idea in a way that really can overcome even well-intentioned skepticism on this topic?
Thank you, Michael. And what a beautiful story and analogy for what we're trying to achieve. All the efforts in Houston, I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction, and I appreciate your leadership. So I've thought really hard about this question, and I think it would be hard to call it well-intentioned criticism. If you don't believe that diversity outperforms, if you don't believe that having diverse perspectives coming to the table helps your business outperform, you probably have not been exposed to diverse thought. You may have not been exposed to powerful women and really capable, diverse talent. And I hope that you get that opportunity. I think for those who are still skeptical, there are some really great data that's come out in the last few years. And from my perspective, as a venture capitalist, what we're looking for is return, right? We're looking to invest in great ideas that are going to drive the future of our economy from the ground stages. There hasn't been a whole lot of participation by women and minorities in the venture capital space. And so we haven't seen those types of products and services that really address a broader community. So there has been quite a bit of data that's come out, though, and specifically from my area, which is backing women founders. In In terms of returns, the Coffin Fellows have found that women-led teams generate 35% higher returns on investment than all male-led teams. PitchBook and AllRaise found that women-led teams exit faster and at higher multiples than their all-male counterparts. Right there, 35% higher returns, faster exits, meaning I'm getting my capital back almost a year faster than a team led by all men. And then higher multiples. Again, I mean, what we're looking for is our money back and our money back fast. And then also when it comes to the venture capital firm level, there's a lot of work to do there with only 5% of venture partners being women. So 95% of all venture partners are men. I think that's a staggering statistic. And things are definitely looking up, and there's been a lot of progress. Over 75% of new funds in the last few years have been started by a woman or minority. So there's a lot of great opportunity, but they're still in the very early nascent stages. Harvard Business Review found that VC firms that increased the number of female partners by 10% have increased their fund returns 1.5% and have 10% more profitable exits. So the data is clear that diversity does outperform and can be a real force multiplier in your portfolios.
Yeah, it's great to kind of look at that data and really consider the question around that framework. So Heath, let me put a similar question to you, and Stephanie did a nice job kind of teeing it up. I mean, the main thing in venture capital is still the main thing, right? I mean, some people may feel that introducing this concept into their existing tried and true investment formulas is kind of like taking your eye off the ball. But how should founders and investors on the call today consider diversity as a force multiplier for results?
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for that question, and thanks, Stephanie, for the great stats. I think a lot of those stats are still sort of proving them coming through the system as it relates to founders of color, and in fact, there's even less venture partners of color, Black and Latinx, in a lot of VC firms. But to sort of drill in on your question, I've got two perspectives here. So one is from a philosophical perspective, where the first thing we have to recognize and address is that the two concepts, returns and diversity, are not mutually exclusive. They are multidimensional and multi-layered. Multidimensional in a sense that you've got this notion of how should society think about diversity, and how should society think about opportunities in that in this classism system that we sort of live in. And then you have all the different stakeholders. So there's so many dimensions to think about this from. And then through each lens, each dimension, it's multi-layered, almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The physiological needs of one group may not match the other group. So if one group believes that diversity is like food, shelter, water, but the other group believes it's a community service, right? We're not on parity, and we'll never really solve the problem. So I think we have to really dig in and think about that. And over the summer, during the height of some of the sort of unrest after George Floyd's killing, a lot of people read the book White Fragility, and I even ended up reading it myself. And it's a really good example of that. Once you get beyond the emotional shock that it creates for some, whether you believe or don't believe, there's really some introspective, inward looking that can be done to sort of figure out that diversity should be core to what it is we're doing, and it should be more like a physiological need in this Maslow's hierarchy of layers there. From a more tangible perspective, I would say that just as Stephanie indicated, right, we're in the business of finding untapped markets and opportunities to invest in as investors, and I believe our LPs expect us to leave no stone unturned to deliver superior results. So I believe you have to look at diversity as this basic need. 15 years ago, when the co-founders of Mercury, Dan and Blair, started, they focused in on the middle of America because it was the untapped opportunity at that time. And And I would argue that, as we stand today, middle of America continues to be an untapped opportunity, but that untapped opportunity includes diverse populations where, as Stephanie indicated, there are unmet needs and there are problems that need to be met or that will be met. And those opportunities lie in diverse populations. Last year, we invested about 40% of our new investments in women and founders of color. And we think you need investors on your team that understand opportunities in these markets. You need advisors on your team that understand these markets, experts, and you need groups that can help you to really take advantage of the untapped opportunities there. You need diverse deal flow. Stephanie, I remember a couple of years ago when you and your co-founders challenged Blair to really look at his deal sources, and that he would see that they're probably not diverse. And sure enough, Mercury's deal sources weren't diverse. So you have to really look inward, and that's one of the reasons why I was part of the team that founded Urban Capital Network, is because that group brings VC firms diverse investors, diverse deal flow, and diverse talent, so that they can try to be better prepared to take advantage of the opportunities as the hockey puck continues to shift. So I just think it requires deliberate intent and a focus on measuring the impact. But ultimately, you have to recognize that the hockey puck is moving in a direction where your LPs will require you to be looking under every stone to deliver a superior return.
Yeah, so let's kind of dive into that a little bit more. I mean, Heath, I think what you've talked about here is a sense of getting into untapped opportunities. So, we talk about diversity. It's not simply about financial return. It's about having a greater sense of perspective. And Stephanie, I'll turn to you. It's a greater sense of perspective and a clearer view of the untapped opportunity that's out there, right?
I think that's exactly right. And thanks for the shout out, Heath, on our thoughts around changing your pipeline. We had to take that same inward perspective over the summer too, when things were going on, the unrest around George Floyd's death. We saw just so many firms coming out with statements, and we were like, what do we do here? Do we say something or do we do something? And we actually looked at our pipeline. So it goes even further, even in the diverse funds, making sure that we're looking at the most diverse opportunities and overturning all the rocks, and said, why aren't the 40% of women of color making it to the top into our investments? And so, how do we check our bias to make sure that we find the best companies innovating across consumer and fintech, and back those women? And we found 2 of those women and backed them over the summer, and they're doing incredible. And so, to answer your question, Michael, in terms of perspective, the way we think about it and the way we coach our founders is don't fall in love with this product and this solution because you're going to fail, right? Really focus on your customer, understand their problems and their needs, and fall in love with the problem. And that's not how it's been working to date, right? We've seen it with a lot of conversation around fintech. Products for women and minorities are not created by women and minorities, and there really is a true gap and true need to serve that population. 75% of all consumer purchasing decisions are made by women, and that includes diverse women. And so if you really focus in on your customer, you need diverse perspectives to create those solutions. So backing those founders that understand the problem, that understand their community, you have a huge opportunity to take advantage of that force multiplier and diversity. And that's the role that venture capitalists play. We're essentially our middlemen. We're taking funding from LPs and giving it to the best opportunities. They're going to see the light of day, giving certain businesses the chance to succeed. And the more that we invest in diverse perspectives and diverse founders, the more solutions, products, and services that are going to come to the market for a broader population and empower those economies to solve some of our deepest social problems.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just do a quick reminder to our audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A module. We'd love to hear from you and address the questions that are on your mind. So Heath, let me turn back to you. Stephanie, thank you for that summary. And I think that's a great way to think about it. But Heath, let me go back to you and say that as many investors, rightly so, they tend to stick to the areas that they know, the themes that they feel comfortable with, and the areas where their experience can bring the most value to the product or the team or the problem. So how can this tendency either hurt or inhibit efforts to expand into more diverse areas of thinking on this?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, interesting and fascinating, Michael. Many do take this approach, and I believe in the future, it might be a negative. Absolutely focus on what you know, but if you can only relate to a small portion of the population, then you're leaving value on the table, right? So what do I mean by that? We all know that so much of investing in early stage innovation is intuitive. And investors will usually invest in what they know and what resonates with them. But we also have to recognize that there's this natural inefficiency, right, in trying to relate intuitively to someone that's different than you. So, when you go into a room, do you gravitate towards all of the people you know, or do you gravitate towards meeting people that you don't know? Forget diversity, right? So just naturally, there's things that naturally come to us, and you have to train yourself and prepare yourself to think differently if you want to be deliberate and with intent. So similar to what Stephanie said, if it's an all-male team, then they can only relate to half the population if they're not thinking with a diverse mindset, right? So in a lot of cases, it's all about attitude and how you think about diversity. And Stephanie mentioned the 5%, right? In the sense that you've got 95% of decision making with men about potential female opportunities, or similarly, less than 1% of partners are Black or Latinx. And so now you got 99% of partners that don't quite understand an opportunity that may be in that market. So you really got to open up and not just sort of sit back on focusing on only what I know, because ultimately, right, let's peel the onion back. You shift what you know over time based on your themes, based on trends. So in some cases, I sort of question if focusing on what you know is an excuse, or are you really looking at the trends? Are you really trying to make sure you're thinking beyond yourself? We typically do it in our functional areas. So why can't we do it in a broader sense and a different sense? Again, multidimensional, multi-layered, and where is this topic on our physiological, foundational needs, right?
Yeah, so I like to respond to that too, Heath. We saw some really interesting data last year during COVID. Overall funding went up, but funding for female founders reached a 3-year low. So this happened with all good intentions. It continues to happen. So overall seed funding went up. Funding for female founders reached a 3-year low. So I think it's really important that we have to be intentional. We can't rest on our laurels, go back to just what we know, because we've seen it play out, right? More women have left the workforce and they're not coming back. So we're really leaving talent on the table by not having solutions, services, products that empower that half of our population to be productive members of society. And regardless of what we say, allocators and investors are not holding their feet to the fire. And I think it's a really important statistic to point out. And I think the way that we see real change is that we back more diverse fund managers, because they truly are the allocators of that capital that gets to those founders. The stats show that Female funders are 2 times more likely to back a team with at least one co-founder and 3 times more likely to back a female CEO. And I'm sure that there's the exact same statistics for minorities. And so we have to get more funding into the hands of diverse allocators. The problem, though, at the even higher level of the big allocators, the pensions, the LPs that are writing checks, that there's so many. This is a new phenomenon, right? That 75% of all emerging managers just started in the last 5 years. So it's a pivotal time where female and diverse managers are proving out that they have the chops to be venture capitalists. They do. The data has shown they outperform. What happens is, these allocators are really trying hard to create diverse emerging manager programs. They tend to be small. It's really hard to allocate to funds that are under 100 million, and most emerging diverse managers are under 100 million. So there's this gap in terms of capital, and then they get deferred to diversity initiatives instead of the core investment strategy. And so then it creates this competition among women and minority-led funds fighting for these very small pools of emerging manager capital. And so I'm seeing some really great shifts in this. There's some really great organizations, All Raise, Women in VC, Raise at the Presidio, pitch competitions that are focused on investing in more female founded and more diverse managers. But there's a lot of work to be done. And the statistics did not get better under COVID.
Yeah, Stephanie, the only thing I'd add to that is you bring up a really good point about, it makes me think that some of the allocation issue also is lies with, we're all looking for that unicorn, right? So in some cases, you've got to really think about the amount of capital that needs to be deployed on certain opportunities and projects that could be great returns, but they may not be unicorns, right? We've got a very specific thought here at Mercury about what returns look like in the middle of the country compared to the coast in terms of what the exit ultimately looks like, right? And I think there's the same amount of logic and thought process there in terms of what a particular opportunity in some other markets might look like and what the return could be, because return could still be great. And it may not take as much capital to be deployed. And I think new emerging managers focused on women, focused on diverse populations and the opportunities in those markets will capitalize on them. So, and I think that would be unfortunate for some of the other funds that haven't expanded to look at that.
Yeah, great conversation. What I want to do now is try to pull it back to kind of the topic for the conference here. Houston really is uniquely positioned to take a leadership role on this topic, and there's a lot of compelling research that indicates that Houston is on the leading edge of this cultural and demographic change of the country. So Stephanie, can you maybe share with us some of the things you've been exploring in these areas?
Yeah, so overall, right, the United States is going to be, there's not going to be a racial majority by 2055. We're already there in Houston with, non-whites, non-Hispanic whites being a minority, right? So we've had some interesting conversations about still calling minorities when they're the majority here. And so I think it's a really great, the way that we have, the opportunity that we have in Houston to capitalize on diverse talent, I think can really be an opportunity to show the nation what can be done with that diverse talent pool. I was looking into some of the statistics, and Houston ranks 20th in the nation for women-led venture funds. So only 0.5% of female partners are in Houston. A shout out to Mercury Fund for hiring my good friend Samantha Lewis and changing those statistics along with what the Artemis Fund is doing. So I think Steven Kleinberg has done some really great research on his book in Prophetic City about that some of the issues that we're facing here in Houston will ultimately be national issues. So I think that we really have the opportunity to be a leader, to support more diverse fund managers, more diverse companies here in Houston, and we're doing exactly that. Mercury and Artemis actually just teamed up to back a Black female founder, and we're really excited about that. She's one of only 100 Black women who've ever raised over $1 million from venture capitalists, and I think steps like that are going to put Houston on the map.
Oh, it's fascinating. And you're right that where Houston is today is the direction the country is going. And I think what we can learn and what we can share going forward is going to be critical to really addressing this issue the right way. Heath, let me turn back to you. We're going to shift a little bit here. We often think of issues around diversity and inclusion as sort of two sides of the same coin. They just seem to pair well together, but really they are different things. And for many business leaders, it's wise to consider that the inclusion aspects of their organizational culture, they need to think about that even before they're diving headlong into a diversity initiative. So can you unpack a little bit of that for us?
Sure, Michael. I'd love to. No matter if it's the VC, the entrepreneur, or anyone in the ecosystem, I go back to this Maslow's hierarchy thing, right? It's like diversity is the what, and inclusion is the how. You and I, in talking about this a little bit, we talked about this Harvard review article. I'll put it in the chat at some point before the end of this. But it talked about diversity focuses on the makeup of your workforce, such as the demographics, and ultimately it's the result, right? Whereas inclusion is a measure of culture that enables diversity to thrive. And it talks about how inclusion is difficult, and that the research suggests that much of it doesn't lend itself to training, which I totally agree with, right? It kind of talked about if you if the right company, to get this right, the companies build an inclusive culture by hiring for attitude and then training for skills, right? And here at Mercury, we believe that you hire for behavioral competency, and the belief is that by hiring managers who are naturally thinking more inclusive, you'll have less hidden bias in your hiring decisions, and more natural selection of a broader population of people, to achieve diversity. So I think intentional, deliberate actions that have a measurable impact is key for us to make progress. So let me give you a quick example. We invested in a company at the end of Q4 that they use a right here in Houston, by the way, a company based here in Houston. They use a Match.com like algorithm to help companies align values, behavioral competencies, and skills to what an employer needs. So if two hiring managers with similar needs, one has a naturally inclusive mindset in terms of how they think about things, and the other feels pressure to meet a diversity quota, in the long run, which team will truly leverage and profit from a diverse perspective, right? When you approach diversity as a community service, in most cases, there isn't true mutual respect, and therefore we don't make sort of true progress. So this notion of diversity and inclusiveness is really thinking about how do you hire people that naturally have an inclusive mindset based on their experiences, based on how they were brought up, based on how they approach the world, and that by bringing those people in, you don't have to sell diversity, right? They will approach this in a similar way to the company we just invested in, where fundamentally, again, go back to this fundamental need that you include that in how you think. And we need more of that. Now, personally, I think we got to move a lot faster, right? Because that could sometimes take time. And we need to get that track going, but there's a lot of people that have an opportunity to make a difference. And again, it's got to be deliberate, it's got to be intentional, and you have to measure it if you truly want to see an impact.
We only have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we leave some time to get to our questions. So Stephanie, I'm just going to turn back to you. I think some of the questions that I'm seeing are surrounding some of this topic, but I want to kind of dig into this idea that for women in tech and women in venture capital, either right or wrong, there seems to be this historical trend that they originate from certain functional disciplines and are limited to expertise and maybe historically, female-centric themes. But what are investors missing by perhaps approaching and evaluating female founders through that lens?
Yeah, well, I've already talked about the returns, right? I mean, I think investors, what they care about is returns. You're simply missing out on returns by not investing in women and minorities. Diverse managers, diverse founders that are serving broader, larger markets that have been untapped and unserved. But I think what's happened because VC is such a network-driven, apprentice-driven business, there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity for women to move up into into partnership level. And so what we have seen is that women are simply, and minorities are just simply starting their own funds, and they're showing that they can outperform. One of the reasons that we like to invest, to tag onto what Heath just said, and to seed, is I think that the earlier you invest, you get that culture right, the more opportunity that you have to have a sustainable company that outperforms and delivers returns. But yeah, I think this issue of women don't have enough STEM degrees, it just really rubs me the wrong way when that's the excuse, because you don't need a STEM degree to be a CEO and to manage people and to put fires out. And a lot of what you're doing as a really good CEO when you advance out of that first fundraising is managing people. It's making sure your team runs well, make sure your team is happy, it's sustainable, it's going to get you to the next level. I think women are just really suited at that. And they're proving that they can outperform.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Heath, I want to go to you on this, kind of picking up on that idea of team. You and I have often discussed the importance of team and the overall calculus of the investment thesis. So as an investor, how do you and your friends there at Mercury Fund and others, how do you evaluate the potential of the team against the potential of the product, and how do we kind of figure diversity into that process?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Again, it's in looking at the questions, to your point, there's a couple of questions related to. I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm tying in a couple of these questions where they're saying, what's more important, diversity or return? What's the litmus test for those who are authentic and structurally making changes to have diverse voices and investment committee? So I think all these things relate to your question, and the dynamic in entrepreneurial teams is similar to that in a VC team. If you don't have a diverse perspective, if you don't have a diverse team, you don't have a diverse perspective, which means you have an incomplete perspective, right? And you're missing out on an opportunity to connect with people, purchasing power, and ultimately profits. So in this case, at this moment in time, the diverse perspective is really where the opportunity is. It's where the hockey puck has moved to, and we're all selling a product. Stephanie mentioned this earlier, right? Institutional LPs are getting money from pensions, their constituents. They are selling money. We get money from them. We are selling money, and ultimately, the entrepreneur is selling their wares to sort of keep our economy coming. And you have to decide if our product must have a diverse perspective, right? The upside of diverse perspectives within all of these teams is the same. It should make your end product that much better. And I believe the linchpin is for us to create this rising tide. Diversity does that for us, so that we create a rising tide for diverse populations in our changing society. But ultimately, to a question that came in on returns or diversity, it's returns. As fund managers, we can't not deliver a return. However, I believe institutional LPs, we're hearing it already, they want to ensure that this inclusiveness is being brought to bear in our investment strategies. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are giving in to lower returns, but they are factoring it into how you approach your fund management responsibilities. And I think that in time, I think the mechanism for return will include how are you creating a rising tide, right? Today, it doesn't. So today, those are two different things. But again, I go back to my first, your original question and my first comment. They are not mutually exclusive. And I think LPs when they start to hear people who think about those things as being mutually exclusive, they're going to run. And I think that over time, you'll start to see how this inclusiveness and ultimately diversity is factored in to the total return. And I don't believe the return will go down. The return expectations will go down. They will want to understand how you're factoring them in. And in fact, to Stephanie's point, they will go up. And the firms that understand how to do that, they are going to be the winners in our future economy.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that rising tide a little bit. There was a question in here about the types of industries that disproportionately affect minorities and that have a lack of diversity. I think that to Heath's point, diverse and emerging managers, they get this. Like, we're living it, we're breathing it, we're raising it, making the case that diversity outperforms. But then taking it to the next level for these LPs is the types of companies that we're investing in and the impact that they're going to have on a diverse population. So it's not just quotas around, are they hiring women and minorities, but like, what is the impact? What does that result in on the ground level in the companies that we're investing in, right? And so at the Artemis Fund, we're really leaning into this idea of diversifying prosperity, right? And so some of the areas that have really lacked diversity, and I think that have held a lot of women and minorities down, are fintech. The lack of diversity in fintech and the types of financial services that those who don't have financial advisors have access to. I mean, I think everything we've saw with the stock market over the last couple of weeks. I mean, you have to have the opportunity, social, for upward mobility. And so making sure that you're investing in solutions that create that for more people is really important. And so fintech, obviously femtech, the fact that most products for women have not been created by women is a real problem, and why a lot of women's health has just not been addressed. Taking care of the family, the fact that women left the workforce at 4 times the rate of men and are not returning is because we have not been creating products and solutions that help empower them to be productive in society. And then education, right? I mean, I think the disparity in those who had access to the internet and could continue to get education during COVID is going to have impacts, I think, for years to come. And so making sure that the things that we invest in not only count the number of women and minorities in those companies, but also have impact down to the social and economic impact of the future of our economy is an important role that venture capitalists play as well.
Thank you. Yeah. No, good. Thank you for addressing some of our questions from our folks here. We're nearing the end of our time, so I want to make sure we stop and let people get to the next session. But thank you all so much for a thoughtful conversation. It's meant a lot to me personally to be able to work with you guys on this, and I hope that it's been helpful for the folks on the call today. Heath, Stephanie, any final thoughts you guys want to leave with our audience today? Heath, I'll start with you.
Sure. I'm Michael. I'm a big believer in mindfulness, and I think to truly create this rising tide in our communities, we must remain mindful of the realities we face as a society, and truly assess if our words align with our actions. Progress is made when we are intentional and deliberate, and when we inspect what we expect. When we hold ourselves accountable for being part of the change we want to see in the world. And just to close out, 2 questions, and I'll name them because I know them well. And it's funny, from Jan over at the ION, when you think about what the ION's trying to do in our community, him leading that effort, he goes back to your symphony example, and he says, symphony orchestras did not have diverse members before blind auditions became the norm. Is there something to learn there, right? And then Sandy asked, if you could change one thing to enhance diversity, what would it be? I would have blind auditions for venture partners, for all of the jobs, and the company I mentioned we invested in, they do just that, right? They use a Match.com like tool without regard for pictures, without regard for names. You have to take the natural biases we have out of the equation if you really want to do something about this. And I think the people that are listening here today can make a change, and I encourage and challenge everybody to look inward for what you might be able to do to offer better solutions for everyone to create this rising tide.
Great. Stephanie, quick closing thoughts?
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael and Heath, for this really incredible conversation. I think I always like to end things with a call to action. I echo what Heath said about taking stock of your intentions, doing a diversity audit of the things that you're investing in. How are they performing? So you can see the data yourself, get involved. There's a lot of opportunity to get involved and to find diverse opportunities. Heath mentioned the Urban Capital Network, the Houston Angel Network. If you're a woman or minority, get involved in the community, educate yourself about being an investor. So there's more opportunities to invest in these female founders and diverse founders, and then, invest, write a check, right? Take a chance on a woman or minority and see how it goes. Make connections for those in your network, broaden your network, broaden your horizons on this topic, and take a chance.
Good. Thank you all for a very meaningful and thoughtful discussion. I know this is just the beginning of the conversation, and I look forward to continuing it throughout our time together. And thank you so much to the Venture Houston group and Houston Exponential for the leadership they're showing to help make Houston the prototype for innovation in the future. And we hope you have a wonderful day 2 of the conference, and best of luck to all the founders and teams of the pitch competition today. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a great day. Thanks.